The following is brought to you by Total Seal Piston Rings, the leader in ring seal technology. TotalSeal.com. Hello and welcome. Hidden Horsepower is back. Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Castello, and we have got another great episode of the Hidden Horsepower podcast. Before we go any further, I want to bring on the co-host. Last time I saw this guy, it was out at the PRI show. I've been listening back to all these great episodes. They have been awesome. Mr. Lake Speed Jr. Lake, welcome back. How are you?
Oh, Joe, thanks for not firing me after PRI. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. Did a great job. You get to hang on for a couple more weeks, Lake, as the co-host. But I got to tell you, that Keith Jones did a great job. The whole team out there at PRI did excellent work. Yeah, Kevin.
We got Kevin on, right? We drafted a new co-host into the group,
And Kevin
so
with
kind of cool.
Jeff Lutz. We learned a lot, and more episodes to come from PRI, everybody. So to those of you who have been reaching out on all the Hidden Horsepower social media, thank you very much for the compliments, and don't worry, more PRI to come. And Lake, isn't it interesting that the end of the year trade shows become such a big deal in the coming year? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about here today, except the trade show that we saw this amazing piece of machinery at was not PRI. It was actually SEMA. Talk a little bit about our guest.
Well, so our guest is Mike Copeland from Arrington Performance. And what's interesting is, like you mentioned, the trade show is really the springboard into the next year. Between PRI and SEMA, that's where everybody comes out with whatever new, cool, the next thing. And so me and Matt are walking through SEMA, and we walk by and we see Mike, and he's like, "Hey, you got to come check out my my brand new, blown hydrogen-fueled truck." And I'm like, "Wait, time out. It's one thing to have an engine with a blower on it. That's pretty cool. It's one thing to have a truck with a blower in it. Yeah, that's even a little more rare. But wait, hydrogen? You know about hydrogen technology? That's crazy cutting edge cool." So we're like, we got to get Mike on Hidden Horsepower because this is the future. It absolutely is the future. I can't wait to hear him, share some of the details about what inspired this and how you get to having an engine running on hydrogen at the SEMA show.
Absolutely. And I'm excited about it as well because everybody wants to make the entire future electric, and that is not necessarily the case. The reason they're doing that is because they want zero emissions. Maybe there's another way to do it. Maybe there's a way to do it and keep the sound and all of the things that we love about combustion engines. And so let's bring him on. He is the CEO of Arrington Performance, the man responsible for the zero-emissions, hydrogen-fueled LS3 that was inside the pickup truck out at SEMA that had so many people interested, Mr. Mike Copeland. Mike, welcome to Hidden Horsepower. First time. How are you?
Doing great, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
No, we're thrilled. I'm thrilled. Lake's thrilled. And what about that, right? Like, why? Why did you do it? Was it to create a zero-emissions vehicle? Was it because somebody said you couldn't do it? What was the origin of this project?
Well, first and foremost, Arrington, I've owned Arrington Performance for a little over 4 years. I bought it. It was in Martinsville, Virginia. I moved it to Michigan. It's always been my goal through my other company, Diversified Creations, when I ran Lingenfelter, when I was at GM, I always like to push the technology. I know there's always a way to improve no matter what you're doing, and I'm always looking for that. I'm not a huge electric vehicle fan. They have their place, and they're great. I love slot cars, but I kind of like doing that controller with my finger, right? So, but when the opportunity came as we were exploring this and the potential, my wife decided that we would invest and we would go about bringing something new to the world.
And that's exactly what you did. Let's, jump to the response that you've gotten from our industry. People who love combustion and they love a little sound, right? They love the sound of an engine, and you're offering an alternative that keeps all that in place. What have people told you about this?
Well, the response has been phenomenal. I mean, I got so many people that are that have, reached out and said, "Oh, thank God you're doing this. This is this is what we need. This is the answer to the electric car. This is how we save racing. Who's going to go sit in the stands and watch a bunch of cars go by, right? People just aren't excited about that. I got to see that firsthand at the NHRA race out in Vegas. I go there every year. There was a Mustang that Ford had built. It ran low mid eights, electric car, and literally people overwhelmed the concession stands when it came up to make a run. Because not that there's anything wrong, it's great that it goes eights, but there's no sound, and that's the sense, right? You have to excite people. On the other side, if you look at it from just a realistic standpoint, there are 90 million registered internal combustion powered vehicles in the United States. Okay? What are we going to do? Throw them all away? Are you just going to scrap them all because they don't meet some kind of an emission standard that somebody came up with? So doing a conversion to hydrogen allows us to keep the sound. It allows us to keep the vehicle, whether it's a car, a bus, a truck, whatever it is. And it allows us to be zero emission or really, really like right next to zero emission, depending on the individual application. But in the case of our truck, we're testing it, and we have zero emissions.
And as I understand it, it is amazing. And as I understand it, it didn't quite work out. So I'm kind of talking about something that almost happened, but they don't let cars fire up inside those halls because of emissions. But you guys were on the brink or the verge or in the conversation of maybe even being able to start it on the floor because it's zero emissions. Am I right about that?
You're right on the money. Yeah, we were actually on that path. As you can imagine, when I wanted to keep it quiet. I didn't want a lot of people knowing what we were doing, because it's one thing to do it. It's another is some people in our industry have decided all you have to do is say you can do it, and that's just not reality. But so I was trying to keep it quiet. I was trying to get the right people involved so we could get the right exposure for the opportunity and for what we were accomplishing, and starting it on the floor was one of the things that we had a lot of discussion about.
Lake, jump in here with a question.
Well, one thing he mentioned earlier was that the kind of feedback was this could save racing, and I think that's a really, really valid point. That the threat over the industry for the last 6 years or so has been the EPA and that interpretation they have of the Clean Air Act that basically says any car that's once it's been emission certified, it's illegal to modify it in any way that changes emissions. Even if you take the car and you decide it's going to be a track car, you're not going to drive it on the street anymore as a daily driver. You're just going to use it as a race car. That they don't care about that. It's still an emission certified vehicle, so you can't do anything to that car legally to do that. And there has been some cases where the EPA has come in and fined some shops for selling equipment that would allow that to happen. So that there's a specter here looming of what's going to happen to grassroots racing because of this. Well, if using Mike's technology, hydrogen fuel with zero emissions, you're exempt from all of that because there is no emissions now. So we can't worry about what level of emissions is putting out. There's no emissions it's putting out. So that, to me, that's one of the keys. Not only you get to keep the sound and we get to save the fleet, it actually preserves our ability to modify our cars and be able to go racing. That's a huge thing by itself. And then, Mike's other point he made about the existing, what do they call it, the car park, all the vehicles on the planet that already exist that are internal combustion engines. That's one of the things that Formula One is beginning to address. They've been running hybrids for 7-8 years. turbocharged hydros, direct injection, trying to make it as efficient and as clean as they can, still being internal combustion engine. But they're beginning a new era where they're modifying the fuel to try to come up with a more sustainable fuel in terms of what emissions that fuel produces, the emissions related to the production of the fuel. So, their goal is a net carbon production fuel. I'm not saying the fuel itself produces zero emissions because that technology won't allow it, but that's the direction they're headed. And I think it's really interesting to see that, of course, their whole statement is, wait, we have a whole world full of internal combustion engines. We need to do our best job of letting racers do what they do best, which is come up with creative solutions to solve the problems of the existing car park and emissions. And, again, hats off to Mike and his whole crew there, Arrington Performance, for doing what racers do best, coming up with a creative solution. It wasn't the one that everyone sees on TV during the Super Bowl commercials and stuff in terms of electric vehicles. Come up with another way of doing it, but it's still the same net effect. And the fact that you can apply it to existing cars, that's a bigger win for the whole environment, actually.
Absolutely. Okay, so Mike, I can't help but think of the Rush song, Red Barchetta, where there was a motor law and you can't, drive your cars anymore. And honestly, I know that it's a great fear within this community. And, people, if you talk about clean air and clean water, they're totally on board with it. They love the idea, but don't take away my love and my passion and my job and my business to do it, to accomplish it, right? There's got to be a better way, and it seems like you are touching on it. I thought about, the connecting rod companies get to still sell their parts, all of that. But how did you do this? Let's go to the project now. It's an LS3. You got it. And what were some of the steps that you had to go through to change it from running gasoline to running hydrogen? And it is my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that hydrogen is available and already in use in California for many of their fleet vehicles. For those that are wondering, like, where am I going to get hydrogen? How do I do that? Am I going to have it under pressure in a tank in my vehicle? And the answer is yes, yes, and yes. They're already doing it in California. Lay it out for us, Mike.
Okay, so let me give you the answer your question there. I'll give you a little bit of the emission kind of background, and then we'll go into the specifics of my package. But you're correct. There are approximately 50 public hydrogen filling stations in California right now. And in addition, Shell has committed to build 40 more. And one of the latest pieces of legislation that passed in California actually is to support electric vehicles, but because there are fuel cell vehicles that run on hydrogen, they kind of got put in that same category. And the state of California has now committed to add 100 additional hydrogen fueling stations. So that puts California roughly in the 200 filling station range for hydrogen within the next 18 to 24 months. So 50 plus now and more being built all the time. So hydrogen can be manufactured a number of ways. One of the traditional ways that hydrogen's manufactured, it's pulled off when you tap a natural gas well and do things like that. People want to call that hydrogen is dirty because it takes electricity to create it, and when you use those and do things like that. The traditional way of creating hydrogen was somewhat dirty, right? There today, we have blue hydrogen and green hydrogen. Blue hydrogen is kind of a stopgap between traditional hydrogen and green hydrogen. It's created with a much, much, much smaller carbon footprint. The emissions that it creates when they produce it is minuscule compared to the traditional way. Now, going all the way to green hydrogen is created with zero carbon footprint. The manufacturing processes that they do it and the way they do it and how they power and everything they do today is done with zero carbon footprint. So there's zero emission created from producing green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is where all of it will be in the future as they grow. It's some of the president of Bosch actually has gone on record because hydrogen is a lot more popular in Europe and other places than it is in the U.S. So the president of Bosch has gone on record, and they believe once hydrogen becomes more available across the states, they expect the price of it to fall by 50%. So I get asked these questions a lot, so I'll just keep talking and you break in when I get too long. But,
sounds great. No, that's what we want. They want to hear you. They don't want to hear me. Go ahead.
Okay. So people ask all the time, what does hydrogen cost compared to gasoline? So I use California's numbers because they're the only ones that commercially sell hydrogen today. Gasoline in California, 87 octane, is about $5 a gallon. Some places a little less, some places more. But you can kind of average it to that $5 a gallon. Hydrogen is sold by the kilogram. But if you do the conversion between kilograms and gallons of gasoline, it equals about $3.50 a gallon today. So it's about roughly a third less to buy hydrogen than it is to buy gasoline. In our analytical studies and in the testing and everything that we've done with our truck, and realize it's a work in progress, so we're continuing to develop. We were tuning on it earlier today. We ran a whole bunch of hydrogen through it today. And we have estimated about 3.5 hours of runtime on a 3-kilogram tank. So that's comparable to about a 16-gallon fuel tank. So when you break it down at today's numbers, we're about 16 miles to the gallon at where we are today. Now, we continue to work at that, and we're changing fuel ratios, and we're doing all of those things. So, but we continue to get better with our truck, and we're wearing tires out on the dyno. We're running it so much. But, it's just part of what you have to do to develop a program like this. Now, hydrogen is used today, as I said, commercially in some applications in what they call fuel cell vehicles. So a fuel cell vehicle has a hydrogen tank. It uses that hydrogen. It's injected into a membrane, and as it goes through that membrane, it's burned, and it creates electricity. The electricity is drawn off of that, put into a battery pack, and that battery pack is then used to drive electric motors at the wheels of vehicles to create transportation. Okay? So that's the way hydrogen's used today. And a lot of people don't understand what we've done as far as making it an internal combustion engine. So we inject hydrogen. They look like fuel injectors. We're currently running 16 of them because any injectors that were ever designed, they're all experimental, were designed to support like a 4-cylinder, a 1.3-liter 4-cylinder engine. Nobody ever fathomed someone would be crazy enough to build a 6.2-liter supercharged V8 and put it on hydrogen. But yet here I am. So I
leave it to the guy from Michigan to do that, right?
Yeah, thank God for you.
Yeah. Well, it's cold here a lot. We got nothing else to do, right? So, but I have hired Bosch. Bosch is a worldwide expert at all kinds of things. So I've hired Bosch to support me with calibration and with some of my experimental components came from them. Some of them come from other places, but they're a huge asset. They have extremely talented people, and I tell people all the time, because I was one, and not because I was, I guess is why I say it. There's a reason there's engineers, and getting to work with some of the best in the business. Some of my previous friends that I worked with when I was at GM, they're retired now, and one in particular, and he's involved with me in this project as far as helping from an engineering perspective, getting the people from Bosch, some of the others that I've been able to talk to, whether it's tank engineers or fuel regulator engineers, whatever it is and where they're from, their expertise is critical to what we're accomplishing. So that's kind of the outlayer to it. Now, the hydrogen is not everybody, but a lot of people want to think of the Hindenburg when you talk about hydrogen. They want to go, oh my God, it's so explosive. Oh my God, people die. Oh my God, right? The reality of hydrogen is that, number one, it's the lightest element known to man. There's a scale that the scientists have created to assign a number to the weight of a gas, okay? Hydrogen is number 2. There's not a number 1, but number 2, they wanted to leave room in case we ever find one. So hydrogen is number 2. The air around us that we breathe, from a weight perspective in this chart, is a 34. So if that gives you any idea how light hydrogen is, if we escape hydrogen, it goes straight up into the atmosphere as fast as it can travel. Bosch ran a test on hydrogen where they actually created a hydrogen leak and lit it on fire. You got the woof when it went off, but it traveled so quickly into the atmosphere and mixed with the atmosphere that it actually put itself out and didn't even burn the tape on the electrical connectors that they used to create a spark to light it. Okay?
How about that?
So when people look at the Hindenburg and they go, oh my God, it crashed, it died, right? What most people don't realize is the Hindenburg was cloth. They used hydrogen because it's the lightest element known. It was a cloth, basically balloon that they created, but to prevent the hydrogen from going through it, they had coated the whole thing with it like an aluminum substance. There were 7 different chemicals on that cloth, and each one of them was more flammable than the next. So when it hit a power line, it naturally created a short and melted through that and set the cloth on fire. The hydrogen escaped virtually immediately because it's going up. You can't stop it. Unless you contain it, it's going up. If released to atmosphere, straight into the sky. So that's what the hydrogen did. The cloth and the other materials on the Hindenburg continued to burn, and it crashed, and some people got burnt, some died from the crash. It actually wasn't as many people passed as you would assume from something like that. But the reality of it is that virtually no one got burned or hurt from the hydrogen. Now, I tell people all the time, imagine if the Hindenburg had been filled with gasoline.
Okay, that makes sense.
And it went down.
Gigantic bomb. Yeah.
And coated everyone instead of going up. Now, hydrogen burns 3 times as fast as gasoline. So as it went straight up, it exhausted itself, burned up, and disappeared. Imagine if it had went down, coated everything underneath it, and continued to burn.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a great visual to reset.
Yeah.
Our preconceived notion is, yes, this is dangerous. It's more dangerous than gasoline. But as anyone that's ever been around a gasoline fire can replay your scenario in your head, oh yeah, that'd have been way worse if there was gasoline tanks in there.
And we just have to go to any kind of racing in the 1950s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond before, Bill Simpson and others made it a little more safe. Gasoline fires, very, very dangerous, very, very bad, and everyone was using it, right? Like everybody was out there using it. 35 deaths in the Hindenburg, and just hidden horsepower milestone, guys. Talking Hindenburg here with Mike Copeland. Interesting stuff. But your point is well taken, though, because I've brought this subject up to many people, and that's the first thing they say. Like, oh, well, what's it in? Is it in a tank? What's it in? How does it work? Is it safe? And that is the question. But like you said, if you think about gasoline in a tank and you think about hydrogen in a tank, which is safer, that's really the question.
Right. So the tank that I use was actually developed for a fuel cell bus. And that's what they manufactured it for. It's approximately 50 inches long and approximately 17 inches in diameter. So it holds 3 kilograms. It's spun aluminum. It's completely covered on the outside with carbon fiber. It's DOT certified. It has a valve at each end, one that we control with the ECM to open the valve to let hydrogen go up to the fuel regulator and therefore the fuel rail. It has a safety blow-off valve there. We also have a pressure transducer that we use to output to a gas gauge. So, and then at the other end of the hydrogen tank is another blow-off valve. So if the pressure gets too high, it'll automatically vent and release the hydrogen to the atmosphere. So that's the way the tank's designed. Like I say, it's DOT certified. One of the struggles we had when we went to SEMA is SEMA had actually was going to let me start the truck, and Customs seized my tank. It was made in Canada, and it had to come into the U.S., and they seized it because they didn't understand what it was, and they sat on it for 4 weeks, just over 4 weeks, and it arrived at my shop on the Monday of SEMA. So we didn't actually have the tank in it when we got to California, but we run it on portable welding tanks full of hydrogen. So it already ran. We knew it drove, and did that kind of stuff. So hydrogen contains 3 times the energy of gasoline, approximately, and it burns approximately 3 times as fast as gasoline. So we use hydrogen. We store it. Hydrogen is stored in storage tanks at basically 2 pressure levels. Our pressure level is 350 bar, which is 5,074 psi roughly. That's the low level. Fuel cell vehicles, most all of them, use hydrogen in their tank at 700 bar, which is just over 10,150 roughly psi. They do that because they can get twice as much volume in the same size tank. When you do that to fill, the pump has to communicate with the vehicle. It goes through a cooling process as it fills. It does some other things. We chose to not do that right now. We have the opportunity to do it in the future if we want to, but for right now, we don't think we need to do that. So we're at 350 bar. So
and that's nothing to do with the performance of the engine. That's just capacity in the tank,
just
correct?
Capacity, correct. Yeah, it has nothing to do with performance. We actually regulate, right now we're regulating in about the 8 bar range, so we're just over 100 psi.
Okay.
So hydrogen is also very permeable, which means it will escape through materials. So you have to have specific lines, specific fuel lines. If you did a standard like stainless line, like what you typically use in a car, hydrogen will just permeate right through it. So you can't, everything has to be specific for that point, right? So we use special hydrogen leak detectors to test everything. We test it every time. And frankly, the products that we're using have been perfect from day one. So we have had 0 issues with any hydrogen escaping. Okay.
So it sounds like you've got the safety aspect of this covered quite well, actually. Like you've been working really hard to address the safety concerns.
Absolutely. It's critical, right? I mean, I'm not going to put my employees, myself, my friends, my partners, I'm not going to put any of them in any kind of unnecessary chance of something happening, right? There are people in the past, I had somebody that talked to me about it. A friend of his was trying to do hydrogen, and him and his son passed from an explosion. Mm. So, I'm not going to go down that path unless I know I can make it safe. My chief engineer on this, who's my friend that I worked with at GM, one of my really good friends, he helped build all of the fuel cell vehicles that GM has done through the years. So he brings a wealth of experience. Bosch, because hydrogen is more popular in Europe, they've created all kinds of safety standards and guidelines and all those things. And we use all of those, right? We use the standards that the industry has. There are Society of Automotive Engineer specifications for hydrogen. As an example, the valve and how you fill it and the communication strategy. We don't have to communicate at 350 bar, but at 700 bar you do. All of those strategies are designed and defined by the Society of Automotive Engineers. So there are standards for every one of those components and how it functions. And we operate within those specifications.
Well, it's great that there's actually this whole foundation, if you will, that's already been laid by the hydrogen fuel cell technology that you can kind of, like you said, borrow and build off of all of that. But as opposed to using it to power a fuel cell for electricity, you're doing combustion. So as an engine guy, my first thought goes to, well, how similar is the combustion process with a gas like this, which is hydrogen gas, in comparison to, say, natural gas? I remember as a kid growing up on a farm, and we had engines that ran on natural gas. So I know you can convert an engine to from gasoline to LPG, or even just straight up gas. What about, how is that similar, or how is it different than hydrogen combustion?
It is different. There's different temperature thresholds. There's different fuel ratios. There's opportunities to do things with hydrogen that you cannot do with others. It's very forgiving from a, for lack of a better description, an octane standpoint. So when we built our engine, the engine that's in the truck, we're learning, right? And there's a lot we don't know. And, I'm a hot rodder, and we all kind of build to that. Let's better be safe than sorry. So our engine specifically has a number of features that we integrated specifically because we're on hydrogen. We started with the LS3 block. We machined it for piston oil squirters and put piston oil squirters in it. We're using a K1 crank. I have K1 rods, and I have Weisco made a custom set of pistons for me. We intentionally ran a slightly shorter rod so we could run a little larger piston and therefore get more heat transfer out of it. If you ever built a LS, you know that the pistons, you're amazed they ever work because they're so short and they stick so far out of the bore when they come to the bottom. So we run a little larger piston with a shorter rod to add a margin of safety, right? We're very concerned initially about engine temperatures and how much cylinder temperature we built and all of those things, because you have the opportunity to get it really high. So we added that safety. We're using a specific head gasket. I have stock LSA cylinder heads on it with Inconel valves in them. We're running Comp did a special grind camshaft specifically for us, and no, they didn't know what they were doing. I gave them the information and said, "Hey, I need this," and they probably thought I was crazy, but that thing will never make power. We run a very wide center line. Really, the only thing I'll share with you is that hydrogen does not like revision into the intake port, so we run very low overlap and very wide center line. The center line is 122.5.
Wow.
In this engine, right? So, and truthfully, if you actually go out and look, that is really not much different than the way some of the OEs get around to meet the emission requirements when they build supercharged engines. So if you actually go out and study the specifics of the camshafts that many of the OEs use, you'll see a lot of those same kinds of things, right? So it doesn't like revision. So we designed a specific camshaft for that. Right now we have it straight up in the motor, and we do it that way. We're not using variable cam timing.
Okay.
We have a Magnuson 2650 supercharger on top of it. It's designed for the one I'm using was actually designed for a CTSV or a ZL1 Camaro. It's their latest and greatest that they offer. So that's on the engine. We're running 16 fuel injectors. because, as I said, they didn't make them big enough. So we have 8 in the traditional location, and we machined an adapter that goes between the intercooler lid for the supercharger and the supercharger itself, and we added 8 additional fuel injectors that come in from the sides. And it's not optimum, but it works because the hydrogen is light, it's easy to control and easy to pull with vacuum, so we run it that way. So we fire it with spark plugs. I'm using E3s in it. They're a very cold version of E3. It's actually the same plug that they run in the Copo drag pack or Copo Camaros and the drag pack Challengers. So same thing. I have E3 coils, and I have Cook's spark plug wires on it. Cook's built a set of headers for me. They're what I call a long shorty. So they're longer than a traditional shorty header. They start at a 1 7/8 and go up to 2 inch. We really didn't. I don't know that helps, but it didn't hurt. So we're running a 3-inch collector with a full 3-inch exhaust all the way through the truck and out the back. So that's the kind of the package that we have. Now, what we've learned as we continue to do this, we don't really need, aside from the camshaft overlap, we really don't need any of it. We will be able to install this package, and that's our goal, is retrofit packages on any production engine that ran on gasoline.
So if you had an injector that was capable of going in the same spot that could flow enough hydrogen, you could just swap the camshaft, do the injectors, and essentially be able to run the engine.
Yeah, you won't even have to swap the camshaft if you're running a stock camshaft. So if you had an LS motor, or you had a Hemi, or you had a Ford Coyote and it still had stock camshafts in it, you'll be able to run our package with it.
Wow. And that's
even if you had an old 302 Ford or a 327 Chevy, if you had a 273 Dodge, right, we'll be able to run it on this package.
And that's ultimately the goal, let's face it, right? Like, you're trying to solve multiple problems, but if you can create a package that you can sell to hot rodders out there that either by conscience or by mandate need to go zero emissions, you've got something where their classic vehicles that they've loved and worked so hard and put, countless hours and dollars and blood, sweat, and tears are not irrelevant immediately. You are going to have hopefully a package that they can utilize if that were to happen.
Yes.
That's incredible.
And the great part, we have no exhaust after treatment. There's no catalytic converters. There's none of that, right? We use wideband O2 sensors, and they read and communicate with our computer. We're using a computer that comes from Bosch. That's what we're using right now, and that's one of the areas that we're continuing to develop. We operate in some ranges that OE computers were never designed. Our fuel mixtures, things like that, are way, way different than what anybody traditionally would run in a gasoline engine. So in the case of the computers, they're designed to work within a threshold. We're outside of that threshold. Working with Bosch, because it's their computer, they were actually able to rewrite the software in the ECM to let it work. So, those are things we'll be looking at as we go forward. Is it necessary to run a new computer? Can you modify the one that's there? How do you do it, right? So, this is
that based on the fact that the hydrogen, you run it so much leaner?
Yes, part of it. That's one of the challenges. So yeah, people and they ask this, and I've told I'm not going to give away a bunch of what we've paid and worked so hard to learn, but
sure,
our fuel mixtures are between 75 to 1 and 100 to 1.
Wow. Well, and it's funny. So let me jump in here
Tickling.
because I know everybody is. I like to think that I know the audience, and everybody wants to know, like, wow, this is amazing, but what's it sound like? You provided a video, so let's see if I can get some audio for the folks out there just to hear combustion hydrogen. Sounds like any other engine. It sounds like combustion.
You hear a big supercharger whining like crazy.
Yeah.
And the hydrogen is very resistant to detonation. So
could it be all right?
Engine,
let me ask you, Mike. Like, okay, you're just scratching the surface. You're like one team working on this in a way that nobody else is because you're a hot rodder. You said it yourself, right? Is it possible that when this product is refined and you actually learn like what it wants, what it likes, what's the right thing, you're kind of retrofitting, and it's a retrofit concept. I get that, but as you learn, as we've learned on Hidden Horsepower, right? Like you're now on this journey of learning. Is it possible this is going to be better, more powerful engines that are zero emissions that enable us to continue to do everything we love, but also make much more power? Is that possible too?
Yeah, we believe it's possible. So here's the positives and the negatives. I'll give the negatives first to hydrogen, the way we're using it today. We're using it in a port fuel application. So we inject it, 2 injectors to inject the hydrogen. The hydrogen, to get it into the combustion chamber, physically takes about 25% of the volume of the port. So if you just took a naturally aspirated application and put it on hydrogen without anything to change or supplement that, you're going to lose about 25% of the power. So if you had a 400 horsepower engine, you're going to have a 300 horsepower engine. Okay? By what we know today. Now, we know that when we go to direct injected applications with the development in the piston and in the combustion chamber and all those things, and because we no longer have to travel the hydrogen through the port, we believe there's a performance advantage to doing it. Okay? So that's a step that we're going to go through as we continue down this path. One of the other things that we've learned pretty rapidly is these engines on hydrogen really, really like boost. Today, we're running approximately 20 pounds of boost on a 9-to-1 compression LS with no detonation.
Wow.
Sorry.
I'm with you.
You can't do that on pump gas.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are things we're learning, and those are what we're doing. Our initial goal was to put this truck at about 15 pounds, and the target was 500 horsepower. We're at 20 pounds now, and we'll exceed our original estimates for power.
Fantastic. What does it, this is crazy, maybe the answer is nothing. What does it smell like, right? Like, the sights, the smells, the sound. Is there anything? It's just water that comes out? How's that work?
Yeah, there is absolutely no smell. So when you burn hydrogen, there's no carbon monoxide, there's no carbon dioxide, none of that, right? You get a very, very minuscule amount, almost immeasurable, of N2O. And you have to specifically look for it, and it's not a harmful gas, so it's not an emission gas, so it really is a zero effect. The only way to create carbon monoxide is to burn oil. And so if the engine burns oil or your crankcase ventilation system let oil back into the engine, you could create a little bit of carbon monoxide. We do have the ability, depending on fuel mixture, where we could change, and you can see a minuscule amount of hydrocarbons, very, very minuscule. But we're playing with that. The range is really wide open to still keep it zero emission, and that's what our package is. That's our goal. Now, these are not cheap parts, right? This is, I mean, I'd shudder to tell you how much my wife and I have invested to get to where we are. I mean, in the overall scheme of things, it's not even a round off on the decimal point, but this is not cheap. And I'll give you an example. The fuel regulator that's in my truck, because we started 5,074 PSI, we regulate down to just over 100 to put it to the rail. That fuel regulator, when I bought it, was $5,000.
Oh.
The fuel tank itself is $8,000, not counting the valves that go in it. All right? But savings of scale, savings of opportunity. Today, I've got that fuel regulator under 10 cents on the dollar. And we'll continue to work at all the different things to get there, right? When you buy one, it's experimental, it's really, really expensive. When you buy 10, they get a lot cheaper. When you buy 100, you buy 1,000, you buy 10,000, right? Now, I'm a hot rodder, always have been. I mean, I grew up at roughly 4 or 5 years old with my hand up in the door of a 54 Ford holding the nuts so my dad could replace a window regulator, right? I've been a racer my entire life. I love to go fast. I love to push the boundaries. I want to support my industry, my friends, my people that have the same passion I do. The best way I know to do that is to drive the cost of this package down. The way to do that is to do municipalities, to do bus fleets, to do all of these other things where you drive the numbers of the product you need, the individual pieces, high enough, and that it drives the cost low enough so you can transfer that cost across. And I've had a number of municipalities reach out to me. They want to convert 300 police cars to hydrogen. I have people, they have 200 buses and they want to convert them to hydrogen. It's all of that's out there. And that's just from the exposure I got at SEMA.
Wow.
Okay. So we will do a lot of that, and we will do that as a way to drive the cost down so that that people won't have to spend as much to convert their 32 Ford or their 69 Camaro or whatever it is they got in their garage. So there are 90 million internal combustion engines in the U.S. that are registered. I don't need to do 90 million to make this thing successful.
Right. Lake,
no. It's a great point. It's a great point that, hey, that same regulator that will work on a bus or a police car will work on your 32 Ford or your road race car. The same tank will work on the bus. It's same and your race car. So by scaling the acceptance of the base componentry that you need to make this work, then it's not like you're having to make special parts. Then it becomes that short production run, high cost. It really is a very scalable concept, actually, when you break it down to the nuts and bolts of the piece, which is incredibly impressive. It's such a really elegant solution in so many ways that it's like, wow, it was right here in front of us the whole time, and we just missed it. But thank God for, like I said, a hot rodder that has some give a damn that says, hey, let's go make this thing happen. Let's try something else. Let's go a different way. And like you said, there's so many other things that you can learn about this, that when you start building an engine specifically designed around it to really maximize its potential, you could probably see massive efficiency gains just by building to suit as opposed to just retrofitting. So it kind of gives you both directions.
Yeah, well, and Lake, you're really into the piston and ring design and all that kind of stuff, right? So rings are critical with what we're doing, right? We have yours, we have total seals in the engine, right? That's critical to what we're doing. Here's the thing that that is an opportunity as we go forward. Hydrogen burns at 3 times the speed of gasoline. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest challenges to efficiently get an efficiency from a race engine and from any engine is the amount of time it takes for the fuel, once it goes into the combustion chamber, to burn. So the time that it takes to burn across the top of the piston. That's
Exactly.
one of the great limits to RPM. Right?
Yes, sir.
So most people don't realize that. Retired GM engineer, right? So that's the reason the 8.1 engine had a 4 3/8 inch stroke crank and a small bore, because we had trouble meeting emissions with a big bore. So
you couldn't burn the fuel because too far of a distance, right? Yeah.
Right. It's why diesel engines run at a lower RPM. It's not because the components won't do it. It's because the fuel burn rate is so much slower.
Yeah.
Right. So now hydrogen burns at 3 times the rate. Oh, and by the way, 4-inch bore, I'm sure you already know this, about the optimum RPM for a 4-inch bore, just over 4-inch, is about 7,000 RPM. You lose efficiency at that point, but the efficiency of extracting the energy and completely burning the fuel falls drastically above that. If you ever measure hydrocarbons in an engine, once you go past that point, they go crazy. So that's one of the big struggles, right? Because we burn hydrogen at 3 times the speed, with supporting components, theoretically, we could run 20,000 RPM.
Yeah, see, that's incredible. And that's where the efficiency is unreal. That's like literally the sky's the limit, no pun intended.
Right. So, it's the opportunity. There's so much to learn here. There's so much to do. I'm going to build at some point, once I get a little further down the road and we get some bigger injectors. Our goal is to go to 8 injectors instead of 16. So we're on the path to do production level parts, which again lowers the price, makes availability more, and they meet more to what my requirements are. So we're working through those specific details right now. So once we get those, right, we can go down to 8 injectors. The question is, how much power can I really make on hydrogen? So, Arrington's a Hemi company, right? I know it seems weird that we built an LS, but, I got a huge GM history, and part availability is so much better for an LS than it is a Hemi. So, and they're much more common, right? When I'm trying to target that market, I did my first LS swap in my barn in 99. Okay. Today I'm doing Hemi swaps left and right, but there's 10 years in there at least before people really started trying to swap Hemis. So the sheer number of LSs is just so much bigger. So that was why we went down an LS path. But I'm going to build a kind of like a factory stock Gen 3 Hemi. We're going to put the big blower on it, and we're going to put it on the engine dyno and see how much we can make.
Wow.
I want to be there for that. Joe, I can already tell you, man, I can already see it. I want this. Yeah. I want a 400 cubic inch, supercharged, 20,000 RPM, hydrogen-fueled engine. I think we need that. Like, I want that.
I agree with you. No, I agree as well. All right, guys, we're coming down the home stretch here, and I think this is great. Mike, we're definitely going to ask you about advice for the next generation. Lake, if you've got any questions that you didn't already ask, fire away, and then I'll hit Mike with a couple of extras because I want to know the timeline. I want to know how can people help. Like, should they call their local governments and say, "Hey, man, hydrogen stations, we need this." Think about those things. But Lake, if you've got a final question or two, he did go to ring seal, which I thought was very important. I was wondering about that. Like, how important? That sounds pretty important. It's always important. Is it important? It's obviously very important. Lake, but final questions for Mr. Copeland.
He saved the best for last, Joe. That's what it was.
He did.
But yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, my mind is just spinning right now. I can't even ask a question. I'm sitting here thinking about stuff. When we mentioned the flame speed earlier, I started thinking back in my head, like, yeah, I mean, flame speed, I mean, you could run bigger bore because you can run higher RPM. You can really get more efficiency that way. You can unshrap the valves, all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah. Then it comes back to it. I'm like, this is really cool. I think the question is, what can we do to help? How can we help move this forward?
Well, I've had some senators reach out to me, wanting to bring hydrogen to their state. They see the potential, right, and they want to get it there. So, I have some of that going on. I've been invited to go and speak to a group of U.S. senators about, the hydrogen program and the path that I'm on and what we're out to create. So that part's going, well better than I would have expected, right? I mean, who would have ever thought that a senator would call me, right? So, but they have, and we've had a number of great conversations, and they're definitely interested, right? This package is as close to zero emission as you can possibly get. We're on it. We're working on the some of the details right now. Today was a big piece of that step. I'm going to California to the SEMA garage. We're taking it there, and we're running emission tests for CARB. And then CARB has already added hydrogen to their acceptable alternative fuels. So I met with them at SEMA. We had a lot of conversation. I shared with them where I was going and what we were doing, and they were super excited. And so my plan is to get this emission test out of the way and go there, right? And once we get our zero emission certification, I think that the sky's the limit at that point.
Well, Joe, I can tell you this. I think we need to get Mr. Copeland in his truck down to Piney Flats, Tennessee, for the next Engine Performance Expo. One, we get to see it up close that way. But then two, we can also give the chance to broadcast this message out to a global audience. Plus, there's going to be a lot of other great engine builders around there that may get a little bit of a taste for what this fun could be. And I think the more people that start building engines like this, it's just going to build momentum. Well, I think it's a really great thing.
And the idea that there's going to, the concept of a retro kit, right? Like everybody's got their vehicle that they've already put so much love into it, and they wonder like what's going to happen with this thing. That the future is possible. There's a way that is being developed, that is working on, and Mike, you are working on it, and you're taking a lot of that investment onto yourself, but hopefully there is great reward for you in the future. And I can tell you that we featured the truck from SEMA on Motorhead Garage, which aired on Sunday mornings on Motor Trend, and a lot of people were very interested in it. Like, what? Wait, what? How? Fuel cell? No, man, burns hydrogen, and people are interested. I am interested, and I can't wait to see where it goes, and I think we're going to have you back to follow up on this. But a part of Hidden Horsepower is the idea that there is a next generation of engine builders, of students, of people who want to be involved in this industry, who have sought it out via the podcast, and I'd like to give them a little advice for the next generation from our engine builders, our experts. Mike, you've laid so much out there about your, life methodology, right? Engineer, hot rodder, but innovator, technology, all that. What would your advice be for the next generation of engine builders out there?
Well, I think the first thing I would tell them is to learn the past, because people will tell you over and over again that there's really nothing ever new, right? You tweak it, you do this, you do that. I mean, when I was 12 years old, I was racing mini bikes, and I mean, we used to build motors. I was a full-on factory-sponsored professional rider. We were paid to go to events. I had 47 mini bikes at one time in my garage. So, and I had multiple engines for every one of them. So from the time I was 8 years old, I was tearing engines apart and putting them back together, right? I learned from my dad. I learned from my dad's friends. I learned from the professionals that we worked with. But to go in and believe, first off, that the opportunity to invent something completely new really is so much easier if you know the past. So go learn the past. Find somebody to work with. Find a shop. I have an engine shop. I have a build shop. I have all kinds of, I have 30,000 square feet here. And it's so hard to get anybody. I have one young guy that's 15 years old that's here all the time. And, he works every day after school, but he shows up early. If he's got a day off school, he's here because he wants to learn that. And you have to learn from the people that did it and then take what you know, apply it to a new opportunity, and make it better.
And there you have it. Excellent work. Mike, this has been so eye-opening for me. I am excited about your project. I can't wait for updates as you continue along the journey. And you're doing something for all of the car community, right? Like you're opening up a new way that people hadn't considered, and I think that is so admirable, and I thank you greatly for it. I appreciate it. Thank you for being on the show. Lake, obviously, your final thoughts for Mike.
Well, you said it was not only is this for the car community, this is for the earth. This is something for our kids, our grandkids, our neighbors. This is true innovative technology, and it's so cool to see it coming out of racing, because that's one of the things I always believe. And we talked about this on the podcast with Neil Cantor, right, from the Society of Tribologists and Engineers, is that's what racers are great at, is coming up with innovative solutions and making it happen. Not just talking about it, but making it happen. And that's all of that is wrapped up in this project right here. And it's so cool to see it happen.
Mike, great job. Thank you for joining us on Hidden Horsepower. Good luck with the project. Please keep us updated. Do you have social media? Do you have a way for the audience to follow along with what you're doing? What is the best way for people to stay up on this if they want to?
Well, so right now the best way is to follow our Facebook page or our Instagram, and that's Arrington Performance. You can follow my personal, because I put it there too. I have 5,000 followers on my personal, and that's just Mike Copeland. We will very shortly launch Arrington-hydrogen.com, and all of that will be there. But we'll be at shows and events. We do I do a dozen events a year around the country. We're headed to Detroit Autorama the first weekend in March, and the truck will be there, and then the truck will be at the Bradenton NMCA race in the third weekend of March as well. So, but we're around, like I say, social media. Just look for my name or look for Hydrogen Pickup. So we're very fortunate that a lot of people like yourselves are interested and are sharing and promoting. So that's how we make it work.
Very much so. We are promoting Arrington_Performance on Instagram, and now you have 5,265 followers. Happy to get the updates. Mike, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on Hidden Horsepower.
Thank you, guys.
And there he goes, Mike Copeland, CEO of Arrington Lake. My head is spinning, and I don't even know what I'm talking about. You must be going crazy.
Oh, my mind is totally blown. I'm ruined for the rest of the day, but in such a good way. For everyone who's listening right now, please go follow them, like them, share what's going on. Call your senator. Actually, you can call your senators or congressmen. You can go to the websites, right? I think they have a senate.gov, and I think they have it where you can go and there's a little link you can click. Share this information with your elected representatives. This is important. This is as important as the RPM Act. I think the RPM Act is important, and we need that, but this is just as important. And the reason why I say that is because this is more than just racing. It's great for racing, and I want to race one of these things at some point. You could convince me to go drag racing, Joe. I like this concept so much, right? I'd do straight line racing to be able to go drive one of these things. But
well,
I think
I agree.
But sorry.
No, I agree though. You're absolutely right. Continue your thought.
But it's so important for the whole world. For, like you said, for mining trucks, ambulances, police cars, dump trucks, buses, you name it. This is truly revolutionary technology. I don't think he mentioned it, but hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. So it's not something that's in short supply.
Right.
And this is a non-destructive, right, because it creates water. So the hydrogen is still there. You're not destroying a molecule. You're just doing chemistry. So this is truly sustainable technology. I could go on and on, but I'm going to shut up now. It's just cool. I'm so glad that Mike spent the time. And whoever's listening, if you're still hanging in this far, please share this story. It's important.
Subscribe, click the bell, write us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud. As you've noticed, Hidden Horsepower has really ramped it up. There's more episodes from the PRI trade show that are going to be dropping in the coming weeks. All kinds of great stuff happening. NHRA and racing season, all kinds of racing, getting ready to get started or getting started or has started. And it's just going to be super exciting for the remainder of the year. But ultimately, when he said that Ring Seal was super important and we've got yours, I thought, well, I bet you there's a lot of people out there listening that probably have got a little project, maybe not as exotic as this one. If somebody needs rings, Lake, what should they do?
Just go to TotalSeal.com. That is the place to go. You got email links in there. We've got the YouTube video links, the Hidden Horsepower podcast links. It's the place to begin, TotalSeal.com. If you've got a question, pick up the phone, call us 623-587-7400. The guys are here. They're ready to take a call. They have over 100 years of engine building experience between our 4 tech guys. So there's a lot of things they've seen that can help people out. So if you need a piston ring, you got a project, as Keith Jones always says, make us your first call, not your last call.
There you go. He's Lake Speed Jr. I'm Joe Castello, WFO Joe on Twitter and Instagram. You can also listen to my podcast, WFO Radio, which is less technical. It's more interviews with winning NHRA drivers, and sometimes that is Matt Hartford. Continue to join us. Continue to enjoy those episodes. We got many more to come on Hidden Horsepower, presented by Total Seal Piston Rings. We'll see you next time.